Good afternoon, you wee bastards, and welcome back to another War Thunder video with Koala. And as you can tell by the title, in this video we're going to be discussing how the Challenger 2 could fit into War Thunder right now, and why I think it should come to the game in the next update. The Challenger 2 is the modern British main battle tank, developed in the mid to late 90s and pressed into service in 1998. But despite that, and its pedigree, the tank is really not all it's cracked up to be. Sorry viewers from Maximus' channel, and Maximus yourself if you're watching. It's this that has led to the creation of this video, because I honestly believe that the Challenger 2, modelled accurately, could fit into the game right now without being overpowered or game breaking in the slightest. You lads might remember, over the course of several weeks, ending several weeks ago, I had a series on this channel detailing corrections and suggestions for War Thunder's top tier tank models, balancing and gameplay, which this video will go into. The purpose of that series was to pave the way for modern tanks like the M1A2 Abrams, Leopard 2A5 and T90 to come into the game in future, and don't worry lads, we will still be doing that video. First though, there's this to talk about, and I was spurred to make this video by a conversation I had with another content creator, Cathfar, on last week's livestream. By the way guys, weekly livestreams, just saying. While many people will tell you that given the CR2's almost non-existent lower frontal plate armour, the tank is far more vulnerable and therefore inferior to other modern MBTs such as the Abrams, Leopard 2 or T90, along with being very heavy for its power pack. There are just as many people out there to defend the Challenger 2 as a highly specialised defensive weapon, which is what it is. The Challenger 2 is designed to have extremely capable armour where it needs it, and to be used in a very distinct way because of that. These tanks engage from hold down positions where their weaker armour is not vulnerable to attack, and any incoming rounds will hit the turret, which is the most heavily protected portion of the tank. It has a gun accurate to extremely long ranges and fantastic stabilisation and fire control systems, as well as an advanced targeting system and ballistic computer systems. Surely, if the MOD are pouring so much money, time and effort into development, servicing and modernisation of this main battle tank, then it must be a little better than all that. Britain isn't a third world nation after all, and its military upper echelons aren't exactly stupid. The tank must be, in practice, equally as capable as those aforementioned tanks, right? Otherwise Britain wouldn't still field them. Well, as it turns out, no. The Challenger 2, in service since 1998, is a somewhat poor design when compared to the German Leopard 2A4 of 1987 or the M1A2 Abrams of 1992. We'll get into exactly why in a moment, but first of all, let's go over the Challenger 1 within the confines of War Thunder. The gameplay you're seeing in the background is of the Challenger 1 Mark II. I haven't yet unlocked the Mark III and don't really care too much anyway, as, well, the Challengers in game completely suck. I've made multiple videos talking about this before, and once again I'm going to preface this video by saying this. The Challengers in-game are more than capable of getting kills. In the right hands, they can be used to decent effect and yield decent results. They have a very powerful gun, although nothing to write home about when tanks like the AMX-40 and Type 90 exist, and the lack of speed can be made up for by playing to its strengths and hoping for a little bit of luck. This, however, does not make the tank good, balanced, or competitive. A highly experienced player might be capable of getting plenty of kills in a Challenger, but so too can experienced players take low-tier vehicles like M18 Hellcats up against Leopard 2s and T80Bs and get plenty of kills. Does this make the M18 Hellcat a top-tier vehicle? Obviously not. Experienced players are just capable of using comparatively bad tanks for the tier. The Challenger main battle tanks are poorly performing in War Thunder. This much is plain to see, despite the fact that, for the most part, they are accurately modelled. They're just not amazing tanks, especially in the confines of our game, where mobility rules the roost, ballistic computers and realistic sights aren't modelled, and the Challenger faces tanks like the Leopard 2A4 rather than the Soviet T-55s it fought in the Gulf Wars IRL. Actually, it's quite funny. I made a very extensive video some time ago, which you should go watch if you haven't already, detailing the correct modelling of the Mark II Challenger in-game, contrary to popular belief, and praising Gaijin for doing so well. And then a matter of weeks later, they add the Mark III and screw it up. Seriously, I'm one of the few people defending Gaijin against people yelling that they've messed up the model, and then they go and mess up the next one? Ay, you don't make it easy, Gaijin, do you? The Mark III Challenger was equipped with add-on armour in the Gulf Wars, consisting of explosive reactive armour on the lower frontal plate and Chopham or Burlington composite side skirts. These side skirts modelled in game, however, are only partially composite, with the majority being modelled as Italian Romor explosive reactive armour, which is not accurate. The entire side skirt should be made up of composite, although don't get your hopes up for any increased effectiveness. The Chobham composite side skirts are not capable of withstanding any main caliber tank rounds, and even the 30mm autocannon on the BMP-2 will punch right through them at considerable ranges. Chobham armor just isn't optimized to defeat kinetic energy munitions. Against chemical threats, the side skirts should offer similar levels of protection to Soviet Contact 1 ERA, and this is the main purpose of, well, all composite armors, but noticeably Chobham or Burlington, which are surprisingly ineffective, at least comparatively, against kinetic. In the gameplay you're seeing in the background, you'll have noticed me bounce several times off the turret of a Russian main battle tank, and this was actually a T-72A, not even the strongest of the bunch. I didn't exactly fire perfectly, but even still, don't tell me this thing has amazing firepower. Its speed, however, is its main weakness. The tank doesn't match what the game requires from players, which is mobility. It was built to be defensive, and defensive gameplay just isn't rewarding or lucrative in War Thunder. Now we get back to the Challenger 2. The Challenger 2 would face this same issue, having very similar mobility to the Challenger 1. Actually a lower power to weight ratio, although a superior transmission basically makes up for that. The tank would equal the Challenger 1 in mobility, so already it wouldn't be the most effective thing in the world, and it follows the same playstyle of being relegated to defensive use. But the real kicker is its armor. The Challenger 2 uses the upgraded Dorchester composite armor, which is revered as being so strong that the tank doesn't need to have armor everywhere, lower front plate, because it can just sit behind a hill and fire to its heart's content and nothing will be capable of penetrating it. You might think that that would make it too strong to be put into War Thunder right now. Remember earlier when I said that the Challenger 2 is designed to have its armor where it counts and nowhere else? Well, it actually doesn't have all that much where it counts either. While the Challenger 1 had respectable, if not amazing, turret armor for its time, the Challenger 2 is actually barely an improvement, despite how much more modern it is. Actually, the MOD recorded the kinetic energy effectiveness of the Challenger 2's turret to be 15% less effective than that of the M1A2 Abrams with its second generation depleted uranium armor plating. The M1A2 has roughly 600mm of kinetic energy effectiveness on the frontal turret, which gives us a value for the Challenger 2 of 510mm. Of course, there is a slight potential margin, so anywhere up to around 525mm is possible, but 510 is the most accurate estimate we have. Of course, the exact values are highly classified, relegating us to using leaks that are few and far between, and often inaccurate, but Swedish trials on the armor, the results of which are publicly available, also back up this information, putting the Challenger's turret somewhere in the neighborhood of 570 to 600mm KE effectiveness in rolled homogeneous armor equivalents, or RHAE. That value works out to be about 515mm in practice against modern tank ammunition, which consists of monoblock long-rod APFSDS shells. Giving a tank's armor or shell's penetration in RHAE is practically pointless, as in practice, those values will be quite different. This is something I stressed in the modern tank ammunition video I made in collaboration with Maximus some time ago, which once again you should all go check out. The Challenger 2 was noted to have quite superior chemical protection to the M1A2's turret, but in War Thunder, this doesn't really mean so much. It'd just be a little more forgiving when the helicopters come knocking, but tanks aren't really going around using chemical warheads at top tier, and that's not likely to change anytime soon. The Challenger 2's turret cheeks, the strongest part of the tank's armor, would be penetrable by the Type 90's JM33 shell, but nothing else in game currently. The gun mantlet area, however, which is noticeably stronger than that of the Challenger 1 or the Leopard 2A4 or M1 Abrams, is still not capable of defeating the shells fired by those two aforementioned tanks, or the Soviet equivalents, the T-64B and T-80B with their 125mm 3BM22 APFSDS shells. The hull of the Challenger 2 is actually quite an improvement over the Challenger 1 at 500mm effectiveness against kinetic energy munitions. Time and time again I've had people telling me that the Challenger 1 already in-game is wrong because its upper hull should be 500mm effectiveness, almost the same as that of the turret, and they use this source for reference. This source details proposed upgrades for the Challenger during the time when the Mark I was being developed, but these proposals were actually not implemented on any Mark of the Challenger 1. Rather, they were for the early project that became the Challenger 2, as proven by the fact that they also list the high-pressure L30 120mm rifled main gun and L94A1 7.62mm Hughes chain gun, as well as an improved transmission and fire control system. All 5 of these proposals, the Glacis armor, main gun, machine gun, transmission, and FCS, were incorporated into the Challenger 2, listed in this proposal document as a post-1995 tank, designed to deal with the Soviet NGT, or Next Generation Tank, which is supposedly referring to the T-80. The confusion comes from the fact that the Challenger Mark II is often written as Challenger 2, note the Roman numerals, and is not referring to the 1998 Challenger 2. This proposal, however, does refer to the tank that would become the Challenger 2 by using the Roman numerals. The same source also lists the Challenger Mark III, or Challenger 3, as the Challenger 3, not using the Roman numerals. So it seems as though this reference system only came into place after this document was created, and thus the confusion in the modern day, as this is one of the main sources used to estimate the Challenger 1's and Challenger 2's classified armor effectiveness. The Challenger 2 in War Thunder would have the most effective armor for the game, were it to be added right now, and given that the Challenger 1 Mark III sits alongside the Mark II at 9.7, the Challenger 2 would obviously have to sit at 10.0, alongside the M1 and IP model Abrams, Leopard 2A4, T-80B, and Type 90. It is my opinion though that a 500mm hull and slightly higher turret does not make the tank overpowered, considering its lack of speed, which remains the most important factor in these battles. Armor is still just not the meta, and considering that the Challenger 2 would still have the hilariously under-armored lower frontal plate, something far more difficult to mitigate in War Thunder than it is in real life, the protection, although the best in the game, is not alone going to break the game. Actually, this would still likely put the Challenger 2 below the current 10.0s in effectiveness, as they remain the faster and therefore more versatile vehicles. But what about firepower? The Challenger 2, as discussed earlier, replaced the L11A5 on the Challenger 1 with the more powerful L30. Both guns are 55 calibers long, rifled, and both actually pale in comparison to the German L44 or derived M256 found on the M1A1 Abrams, which have substantially higher pressure. 6,180 bar on the L30 as opposed to 7,100 bar on the L44, and the performance of the tank's ammunition reflects this. The L26A1 depleted uranium APFSDS shell, or Charm 1, has a flat penetration of 470mm at point blank range. This is below that of the Soviet 3BM22 shell found on the T-64B at battle rating 9.7, although keep in mind the superior angled performance, but it is also inferior to the AMX-40's OFL 120G1 shell, also found at 9.7, which has roughly 30mm more penetration in both flat and 60-degree pen. Obviously, therefore, it pales in comparison to the Type 90's JM33 shell, which has 530mm flat penetration, and as I've said in multiple videos in this channel in the past, the JM33 in-game has been severely nerfed in its angled performance and should have roughly 310mm at 60 degrees, far superior to the 260mm of the Charm 1 shell at that angle. The upgraded shell that the Challenger 2 would have is the L27A1, known as Charm 3. This shell performs much better, roughly on par with DM33, with the same flat penetration, 530mm, and a whopping 5mm more penetration at 60 degrees, at 315. Now, remember earlier when I said that I was convinced to make this video by a conversation I had with Cathbar on stream? Well, she was saying that tanks firing strictly realistic shells would completely eliminate what little semblance of armor meta still exists at top tier, and this wouldn't be a good thing. For example, in the Corrections and Suggestions series, I suggested that the IPM-1 be given the M900 and go up to battle rating 10.3. The T-80B could receive 3BM29, while we could get the T-80BV at 10.3 with 3BM32. The Leopard 2A4 could get DM33 at 10.3, and the Type 90 could have its shell's angular performance fixed and sit at that BR2. Cath suggested that one day when we have tanks like the T-80U, M1A1, and later variants of the Leopard 2A4 with increased armor, these shells would be trivial to add to our current tanks. Ergo, we save them for the future. 10.0 is our current highest BR, and so 10.0 tanks don't get up-tiered. They fight only down tiers, and so for now we hold these shells back to be given only once these tanks start fighting superior opponents. I honestly believe that raising these tanks' battle ratings to 10.3 and giving them these shells right now wouldn't be too bad, but Cath has a point. Future-proofing our current 10.0s is just going to make them outperform the 9.3s even more, so right now, maybe not. So here's what I want to suggest. The Challenger 2 gets added at 10.0 with its 500mm hull and 515mm turret cheeks, improved gun mantlet, it would easily be the strongest mantlet of any NATO tank in game right now, and equal mobility to our current Challenger 1. But the CR2 is added with only Charm 1, reserving Charm 3 for later, in just the same way that the tanks I just mentioned could get their own time apparent shells, the M900, 3BM29, etc. The Challenger 2 could also see its own additional armor packages at the same time, which would keep it competitive even once battle rating 11.0 tanks are added, like the M1A1 Heavy variant or the T90A. Oh, and if you're wondering about the Leclerc, that tank is said to have similar armor to the Challenger 2, with a turret that ranges between 500 and 600mm in places, and even as much as 700mm directly in front of the gunner, and likely a similar hull as well. The Leclerc, however, has a paper-thin gun mantlet, with even some 20mm autocannons being capable of penetrating it, but it is faster than the Challenger 2 and fires the far superior DM43 shell under the French designation OFL 120F1 from its 52 calibers long CN120 smoothbore gun. Penetration on that shell is insane, at 625mm flat and a whopping 380mm at 60 degrees, which leads me to believe that while the Challenger 1 could see a raise to 10.3 in time, the Leclerc would have to sit at 10.7 to be balanced. The Challenger 2 added in this way would have no stock grind for shells, at least not at this time, and would give Britain a fantastic competitor in the current game, without making them any sort of OP. Armour is still not the meta, and the tank still lacks the mobility to compete with the Abrams, Leopard 2 and T-80 outright, but it would certainly match up well in the defensive role, far better than the Challenger 1 does. As for the Challenger 1, I expressed my wishes some time ago that Gaijin should replace the Mark II with the Mark III and give it the add-on armor package as a module, along with L26 Jericho, rather than adding both tanks, leaving room for us to get the Challenger Mark I at BR 9.3, with L23 as its top shell, rather than L23A1. This would retain the increased lineup, which most people said was the best thing about receiving the Mark III as a separate tank, which is what Gaijin went and did. We don't have Jericho, we don't have the Mark I. Honestly, I see this as slightly lazy and I don't care for the decision much, but that's just my personal opinion. The main takeaway from this video should be this: Britain is suffering right now. We have no helicopters, which is something I'll be addressing in a video in a couple of days. We still don't have a 10.0 tank, our tier 6 jet is an absolute flop. The Challenger 2 at 10.0, missing its Charm 3 shell for now to be added at a later date, would legitimately be balanced, and it would give us a fantastic new addition with a powerful shell and most effective armor in the game. This would make up for the lack of speed and finally give us a tank that does so, rather than suffering in a meta that does not support its design. It wouldn't be game breaking, it may give the other tanks in the game a run for their money and match them in many ways, but certainly wouldn't outperform them to any noticeable degree, and honestly wouldn't be that difficult for Gaijin to implement, as it has a very similar outward look to the Challenger 1, at least aesthetically. The Challenger 2 might end up being the most effective killing machine, the most effective weapon in a one-on-one engagement, I'll give you that, but it would not be the most effective game winner. PvP kills don't win matches after all. Capturing objectives and controlling the map does, and the Challenger 2 would not be much more effective at doing this than the Challenger 1 is currently. For Britain, who has been suffering for some time, to receive a tank that actually performs on par with the current 10.0s, well, every other nation's got one. Sorry, France and Italy. It doesn't sound like such a terrible idea for me. What do you lads think? With the Challenger 2 having these stats, do you think it should be added? Do you think it would imbalance the game? America is still extremely powerful at top tier, and other nations are struggling to counter that, but that could be fixed by giving Germany, say, the Eurocopter Tiger. After all, America being overpowered doesn't make Britain balanced. Britain needs to be balanced in their own right, not being dragged kicking and screaming by the American teams. In my opinion, the Challenger 2 would have to adopt the same playstyle of the Challenger 1, a playstyle still not ideal in War Thunder's meta, but it would just be substantially better at it, and this is something we British tankers need, desperately. Hopefully, Gaijin gets over their hate boner for the British and adds the Challenger 2 into the game, but Once again, let me know your thoughts. Anyway lads, that is going to be it for this video. I do hope you have enjoyed. It's turned out to be quite a bit longer than I anticipated. Make sure you leave a like if you did enjoy this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and come follow me on Twitch, Discord, and all the social media links down in the video description. This video is taking quite a while to research and create, so I'm hugely thankful to my backers on Patreon for their amazing support of the channel. If you want to join them, go check it out at the link down below. As I said earlier, this video will go into the top tier suggestion series, and yes guys, we are going to do that Modern Tanks video next. I definitely want to have it done before devlogs for next patch start getting released, so make sure you do come back for that. It's going to be interesting. For now though, keep your bagpipes close to hand and your kilt firmly on, and I shall see you next video. I say a wee thank you to these lads for supporting me on Patreon. DA261, Latvia Wolf, Gisli Gadarsson, and Dark Recon. You lads are bra. If you wish to join them, come check out the link in the description below.